Welcome back and thanks for staying with us. You're still watching Rapid Dawn right here on Rapid Television. And of course, right now it is time for the big conversation. My name is Victor. Okay.
My name is Martha Alu. Once again, welcome to the 9 o'clock hour, the big conversation centered on the realities of an everyday people.
Very true. And of course, today we are discussing xenophobia in South Africa, a long-standing issue involving attacks and discrimination against foreign nationals, especially migrants from other African countries. And this problem is not new. One of the worst outbreaks happened in 2008 when about 62 people were killed and thousands were displaced. There was another major wave in 2015 which led to attacks on foreign-owned shops and renewed tensions across several cities. Now, in recent times, concerns have returned again with reports in 2024, 2025 into 2026 of fresh attacks and rising tension in some communities. And these incidents have raised fears among migrants and led some African countries to issue safety warnings to their citizens living there. Well, according to experts, they say that the issue is driven by a mix of high unemployment, poverty, and competition for jobs and small businesses. But human rights groups stress that violence against foreigners cannot be justified under any condition. And so today we are asking, what is really fueling this crisis and what can be done to stop it? And joining us is MBEWE, an international relations and diplomacy journalist based in South Africa. Hi, Michael. Good morning and welcome to the big conversation.
Good morning, my brother. Good morning to your Nigerian nation and to whoever is watching us. And thank you so much for bringing me on your platform.
Yeah, we're glad to have you.
All right, thank you for joining us on the show this morning as well.
All right, let's begin the conversation. According to reports in early May 2026, which of course showed the renewed xenophobic tensions in parts of South Africa, right? Countries like Ghana and Nigeria, already issuing a statement of evacuating citizens, including Ghana's plan as well to move about 300 nationals, and Nigeria reporting over 130 citizens requesting repatriation. But from where you are today in South Africa, what is the real situation on ground regarding the xenophobic tension going on in South Africa?
Thank you so much for the question. I'm just trying to re-angle myself here. I don't know if you are able to see me correctly.
Yeah, we can see you. Can just make it static. We can see you. Yeah, just keep it static that way.
Thank you so much. Yeah, so I think it's very important to give context to this issue with regard to the latest wave of anger or attacks that we have witnessed. Anti-migrant sentiments in South Africa has been linked to controversy surrounding the alleged coronation of a Nigerian traditional leader in the Eastern Cape, especially in an area called Kugombo, which is formerly called East London. So videos circulated online showing Chief Solomon Okbona Eziko being presented as Igwe Ngibo na East London. That's how they called him, which many South Africans interpreted this as an installation of a foreign king on a South African soil. So this immediately triggered political outrage, public protests, and also heated debate across media and social platforms. South African traditional leaders, government officials, and also political parties argued that traditional leadership structures in South Africa are constitutionally and legally regulated and cannot simply be created outside formal recognition processes. So some groups framed the event as disrespectful to South African sovereignty and indigenous traditional authority. However, the Nigerian diplomatic officials later clarified that the event was intended as a cultural celebration within the Igbo community rather than an attempt to establish a parallel monarchy or political authority in South Africa. The Nigerian High Commission publicly apologized for the misunderstanding and stressed that Nigeria respects South Africa's laws and institutions. And then I can also attest that I myself, being an international relations journalist, I have engaged with the acting High Commissioner of the Nigerian Federal Republic in South Africa, Mr. Alexander Ajayi Tametope, who is a very good gentleman and we have engaged very, very robustly on these issues, but also giving each other advices on how, the tensions can be handled. So I respect him with, high regard. He's a very good gentleman, but also he managed to visit the area where these issues happened and then met with the leadership there, accompanied by government. There were discussions that took place, and an agreement was indeed taken down to say, okay, this is how we're going to work together as the Nigerian government, but also the South African government. So the incident, nonetheless, reignited deeper frustrations that already existed within sections of South African society regarding immigration, unemployment, crime, economic exclusion, and pressure on public services, just like you highlighted in your introduction to this program. It is therefore important to understand that the controversy itself did not create xenophobic tensions from scratch. It acted more as a trigger point that activated long-standing social anxieties.
All right.
All right.
So what then is the current situation now, as we speak, in South Africa?
Yeah, so the first thing we must say that South Africa remains a deeply complex society. There are indeed recurring episodes of anti-foreign sentiments, especially in economically stressed communities, where unemployment, poverty, and inequality remain extremely high. Migrants, particularly African migrants from Nigeria, Zimbabwe, Somalia, Ethiopia, Malawi, Mozambique, and elsewhere, sometimes become visible targets during moments of social frustration. But it is equally important not to reduce South Africa to a permanently xenophobic country. Millions of African migrants continue to live, work, study, and build businesses in South Africa every day. There are Nigerian doctors, Zimbabwean teachers, Congolese pastors, Ethiopian traders, and Somali entrepreneurs who have integrated into communities and contribute significantly to the economy and society. Most South Africans interact peacefully with foreign nationals on a daily basis. What often happens is that isolated incidents of violence and inflammatory rhetoric receive extensive coverage, creating the impression of a society in permanent conflict. The reality on the ground is more nuanced. That said, fear among migrants is real. Many migrants describe living with uncertainty, worried about political rhetoric, police raids, documentation challenges, harassment, or sporadic violence. Small business owners in townships are particularly vulnerable because foreign-owned shops sometimes have been looted during unrest. So there's both coexistence and tension happening simultaneously.
All right. Thank you so much, Mr. Michael MBEWE, again, for joining us on the conversation this morning. While I acknowledge the fact of what you have said, that we must not reduce South African nationals to just, people that cause chaos and unrest within the country, we cannot also ignore some of the trajectories of what has happened over the years. My colleague here did make mention of the 2008 xenophobic attack that happened. It began from Alexandra Township and then spread to other parts of South Africa, and then we have for 2015, and we have the list goes on, and then till 2026. So according to BBC report at the time, it said that over 60 people dead and over 100,000 people were displaced during that attack. So yes, there is data that we are picking up these questions from. So it has happened time and again. Why we don't want to agree or reduce the South African nation to that as well. But take a look at this. From these attacks that we have called 2008, 2015, I think 2019, and then 2026. And then we had 2002 Operation Dudwala in recent years. Why is this issue, why has it persisted for so long, despite repeated condemnation on the attack? Why do you think these attacks have persisted for so long?
I think it comes to the background of where Africa comes from. In particular, South Africa was one of the countries that has gone through painful past in terms of the governance. South Africa comes from an apartheid government, the white rule, minority rule, where black people were sidelined. You had areas where black people couldn't go, toilets where they could write blacks only, whites only, buses and transportation, in terms of access to education, social services, education. A black child was being allocated 1 rand at that time, while the white child was being allocated 5 rand. So you can see the differences there. So this, when the new government came in 1994, it was all hullabaloo, you know, happiness all over. South Africa embraced the whole continent, but also the globe, because of the history of Nelson Mandela, and of which South Africa really appreciates all those countries that fought alongside South Africa globally, be it Nigeria side by side. We know what Nigeria did to South Africa, and history tells us. But also recall countries like Ghana, countries like Zambia, Zimbabwe here in the south, Mozambique, who worked together during the time of, your Mugabe's, the rise of Mugabe's, the rise of Zambia's president, former president Kenneth Kaunda, your Kwame Nkrumah's. It was a very good cohort of leadership that really steered the African agenda to where we are today. The issue is, what has our governments done to ensure that there are adequate social services given to our citizens across the whole continent of Africa? We must also ask the question to why people are running away from their own countries and then seeking refuge in countries like South Africa. South Africa receives each and every person. You will find each and every type of person in South Africa because of its constitution, its welcoming way of doing things, the hospitality. So, like I'm saying, that these are small pockets of people who, by standard, by definition, are pockets of people who are somehow, people are thinking that they're being sponsored just to destabilize, the government of South Africa. We are still waiting for formal intelligence report. But some of the people that are leading these marches are very controversial people. They've been to court multiple times.
Hello, Michael,
yes.
Please, just to cut in there, you said some of the persons here are sponsored, to carry out these attacks. When you say sponsored, these allegations, who are you referring to as per the people who are sponsoring these individuals who are carrying out this xenophobic attack in South Africa? Who is sponsoring them?
It has been an allegation whereby government is still investigating to say, because people are calling, the majority of the people in South Africa, civilized people, are asking the government, where's the intelligence to say which forces are fueling these attacks? Who is behind these attacks? So we are still waiting for police reports, the intelligence reports, but also speaking to government officials themselves. They have condemned whatever that has been happening. And let us also take note that Ghana has taken South Africa to the AU, reporting them of not doing anything about the current or the recent rise of attacks. Let us also look this issue broadly between Ghana and Nigeria. If we go back in time, I think we recall the slogan called Ghana Must Go, where the hundreds of majority of Nigerians from 140 to 200 were rounded up, harassed and expelled, properties were seized, businesses confiscated, families shuttered overnight, markets that had thrived on Nigerian entrepreneurships were gutted, and then they retaliated by saying Ghana must go. Where between 1983 and then 1985, under President Shehu Shagari, Nigeria launched one of the largest and most humiliating retaliatory expulsions of people in African history, where the infamous Ghana Must Go campaign, over 1 million Ghanaians, along with 2 million other Western Africans, were given short notices to leave. They were stripped, beaten, and so on. So it remains a big scar to Africa's continent. And the present, where Ghana has this act in 2013. In 1969, even more damning, Ghana Investment Promotion Center Act of 2013, Act 865, where Section 27 explicitly prohibits non-citizens from engaging in the sale of goods or provision of services in certain markets. But the big issue here is Pan-Africanism. Me, myself, I'm part of a group that promotes Pan-Africanism. There's a group in Ghana which is led by also Mankosazana Dlamini Zuma, who is an architecture of Agenda 2063, the Africa that we want, under the African Free Continental Trade Area. All these principles are there on how the continent should integrate, how we should trade together. So it's a deep-seated issue. It's not only painted to South Africa, but why South Africa? Because South Africa attracts more migration because of its policies. And
all right, Michael, let me just interject there a little bit, because you're talking about the fact that, it's not only South Africa, and I just want to reiterate the fact that this conversation is not about who did wrong or who did what. It is about the situation at hand, which is the xenophobic attack, and we're trying to look at ways to put that to an end, because after 2026 we don't know what other time this will reoccur, because we have seen reoccurrence in the last couple of years with the attacks on Africans by South Africans. And you were drawing up examples of the Ghana must go situation. Yes, that was a moment in history regarding Africa, and we know what that cost on Africa. So but we haven't seen any recurring attacks on any African from Nigeria here. In fact, according to a report from Reuters, it says that Nigeria is one of the most habitable countries, because you would literally see almost people from different parts of the world represented here. So the issue is not about demonizing South Africa. Now, I also want to reiterate the fact that you should understand that Nigeria supported the anti-apartheid movement strongly. In fact, at some point, Nigeria funded liberation efforts. It's also important to know that many South African activists received support from Nigeria. Now, Nigeria contributed financially to the ANC struggles, and I can keep recounting a number of them. Now, Nelson Mandela once described Nigeria as one of the frontline states against apartheid. So our history shows that we support South Africans. At what point did we get to this point where we degenerated to a country or African countries that no longer has tolerance for other African countries? We're trying to look for the situation here. And, in that light, I'm asking, what permanent situations do you think can be proffered or can be suggested to bring an end to these xenophobic attacks in South Africa?
Yeah, thank you. Just also to remind you that during my statement, I highlighted that Nigeria played a big role,
of course,
to South Africa.
Of course.
I have also said that myself, most of my friends, because of the position that I hold as a foreign, my role is to unite Africa. Okay. That's my role.
Okay.
Within the African Free Continental Trade Area, within the SADC, because I'm also part of the South African presidential media. So we are not anti-African. We are part of Africa. Okay. And we and Nigeria actually we hold such power because we are on the south, and Nigeria is between west and east. Okay. So we are the leaders. But now I was coming to the underlying drivers of these tensions. Okay. Economic, social, and political. These tensions are rooted in multiple overlapping crises. So one is economic drivers. South Africa faces one of the world's highest unemployment rates, as I said, especially among young people. Poverty, inequality, rising food prices, energy instability, and slow economic growth has created deep public frustration. And then in environments of economic insecurity, migrants can become convenient scapegoats, which is something that we're not running away from. So South Africans believe foreigners are taking jobs, dominating informal trade, but also placing pressure on healthy care, housing, and public services. Whether statistically accurate or not, perceptions matter politically. You see. And then, mind you, we are also going into what? Local elections in South Africa. Big local elections, testing time. And then social drivers, there is also a broader identity crisis. Post-apartheid South Africa still struggles with unresolved inequalities, spatial segregation, like I highlighted, crime, and frustrations over unfulfilled democratic promises. In many communities, anger that should perhaps be directed at governance failures is directed towards visible outsiders. Social media has also worsened this dynamic by amplifying misinformation, rumors, and inflammatory content.
Okay.
And then one very important issue, political drivers, which migration has increasingly become politicized. Some political actors use anti-migrant rhetoric because it resonates emotionally with frustrated voters. Groups such as, you said, Operation Dudula and some political parties frame undocumented migration as a national security and economic crisis. And my colleagues, there are two types of documented and undocumented migrants. You can have somebody who has a passport but is expired in a country. That person is not undocumented. That person is documented but is not regulated. Then you have totally undocumented who has no passport, no paper, nothing. That person poses danger to security.
Okay.
So groups, yes, you wanted to comment on that?
Yeah, you've made mention of quite a few of this, but very quickly as well, just to also bring on board, still talking about xenophobic attack here in South Africa. In the month of April, precisely 24th of April 2026, right, the South African government publicly promised a crackdown on xenophobic violence, and they stated that perpetrators will be identified and then prosecuted. Since then up until now, what has been done? I mean, that promise that the South African government made, have they carried it out? Has there been arrest? Has there been prosecution, on these individuals that are carrying out these xenophobic attacks?
At the moment, my brother, I wouldn't say there has been any conviction over this type of attacks. But police, as far as I know, they have been instructed to leave no stone unturned. We are also willing to see that happening, because the figures that I spoke about that are perpetrating this particular, one of them, his property was burnt. I don't know if you've heard about that.
Was it burnt by the South African government, or it was a mob action?
It was a mob action. It was not government. Government is still investigating. Others are speculating that he burned it just to himself. He burned it just to get some attention. But it's still under investigation. It happened just 2, 3, 4 days ago. I don't know if you've seen that particular person. He wears a Zulu
costume.
All
right. I would just want to speak also about the Operation Dudula. Are you with us, Michael? All right, thank you so much. Right, the Operation Dudula, from my understanding, started off in 2021 and has become a group till the present. And it is called a controversial anti-immigration movement. In fact, reports say that they accuse foreigners of crime, unemployment, pressure on public services, which of course has been fronted as one of the major issues for the xenophobic attacks right now. According to Al Jazeera, critics argue or accuse that the movement, this Operation Dudula movement now, of fueling xenophobic and vigilantism. Please, can you speak to us about the Dudula movement? What is it about? What does it seek to address? Are the rumors or allegations based on Al Jazeera's assessment through about the Operation Dudula?
So Operation Dudula began, like you're saying, like a movement, like a social movement, like any social movement.
Okay.
But focusing on undocumented migration, pushing government to take charge of undocumented migration. And then they escalated their operations to a party. They are a registered party, but their operations in larger part of South Africa has met with a huge condemnation. I think you have also seen the president of the EFF, Malema, who is also a Pan-African himself. He has condemned largely about this, because these things are not just only cannot be only celebrated, because it damages the reputation of the country. And South Africa is leading in many corners in terms of the pushing the agendas of the African Union, representing Africa at the G20 level. So there must be a serious conversation at the AU on possible pathways toward, how these issues can be de-escalated, integration. Let us also note that when anybody comes to South Africa, be it a refugee or undocumented migrant, or South Africa doesn't put you in a camp where you will be fed, and no, you are integrated into the community so that you can become part of the society, and you can become your own person. You can study, you can start a business, So government is not like pushing this thing to say, Africans must go, because end of the day, where are we going? We are going into one Africa. There is a time where we might be having one passport, one currency. Of course, that has been the dream of our forefathers. It has been met with the pushbacks. We know where this pushbacks has been coming from.
All right.
But now this is a new chapter. South Africa has the youngest population, 60% arable land.
All right. Thank you so much. But I'll just like to take you back to the question about Operation Dudula. And I do acknowledge the fact that we want one Africa, and in fact your efforts regarding Pan-Africanism is quite commendable. But if we don't nip in the bud some of the major issues that we see, like groups just coming up and taking laws into their hands, we might be such a long way away from fighting against attacks like this against other African countries, which is what will make me ask you again about Operation Dudula. Is this a recognized body in South Africa, and are these movements expressing legitimate frustrations or dangerously normalizing xenophobia? I just want to know what the stance of the government is regarding the operations of the Dudula movement.
So, okay, the movement emerged in response to South Africa's high unemployment rate, housing insecurity, and rising crime. Members said that undocumented migrants worsen this crisis and strain public services. Crisis, however, critics, mind you, argue that the group fuels vigilantism and then also xenophobic sentiments. So what are the tactics and public backlash? Healthy care and education blockades. The group has expanded its focus to block foreign nationals, including those legally residing in the country, from accessing public clinics, hospitals, and schools. Building and property raids. Members frequently conduct raids on informal traders, raid businesses, and confront migrants occupying abandoned or hijacked buildings in inner city Johannesburg. Legal action. Human rights organizations and government's committees have condemned these blockades as illegal. Courts have issued directives and interdicts ordering Operation Dudula to stop harassing foreign nationals and interfering with public services. And then what is the meaning of this Operation Dudula? It's derived from the isiZulu word for to push out, okay? So what is the political evolution of this particular group? Initially starting as a grassroots civic pressure group, as I said, Operation Dudula officially registered as a political party to contest the 2024 elections. So the movement's internal structures has been several leadership transitions as it attempts to balance street-level activism with formal electoral political, politics. So more on these stations, like I've just highlighted to you, that is a brief scope of what is the agenda, behind this particular group. Okay. But you can see they have highlighted that government have condemned their tactics, but also several civic movements have also condemned rights groups.
Well, much more than condemning this, Michael, we do agree that it is one thing to talk about policies and it's another thing to implement these policies, because we have had groups that began like this and rose up to become something more daunting and becomes terrorizing a lot of other people, maybe at some point even South Africans. But what steps do you think the government can take decisively to curtail the operations, or to ensure that the operations within groups like this do not move away from or do not disalign from what they originally started off as?
Yeah, indeed. I think it's just to follow the law. The law must take its course. Whoever is misbehaving, the law must take its course. If there is an illegal immigrant, I don't have the powers to go and ask any Joe, Tom in the street to say, I'm a South African, where are you from? Okay. That's not my job. It's authorities that has been given the task to identify people, but also their processes, the right processes that have to be followed whenever. We mustn't also forget that migrants are humans. Any migrant across the continent or everywhere in the world is a human. So there are human rights principles that must be applied whenever you are dealing with issues of migration. So the law must take its course. Whoever is misbehaving, whoever is doing things out of the law, whoever is not given the mandate to act as an immigration officer or a law enforcer, the law must act against them.
Okay. Now, Michael, I want to understand. Of course, we know that South Africa remains one of Africa's most industrialized economy. But of course, again, we're talking about xenophobic attacks. Yet, xenophobia has continued to reoccur despite government interventions again since 2008, 2015, and of course again in 2026. My question to you is, why is it becoming difficult to permanently resolve the situation or the issue of xenophobic attacks in South Africa?
I think, like I said, there must be honest conversations, amongst our leaders, not only South Africa, but amongst our leaders, to say what is fueling the influx of not documented, but undocumented migrants to South Africa. And another thing that we are forgetting here as well is, we also have Chinese migrants who are undocumented. We also have Europeans who are undocumented. We also have Russians. But there is just this, black on black hate. Why this? That's why I'm saying we must have honest conversations. Because why are we not chasing the whites? Why are we not chasing Chinese? Why are we not going after, we are going merely to a brother who you are fighting, crumbs of bread on the floor. So denying that tensions exist is not going to be helpful, but neither demonizing entire populations. I like how my sister also broken down the whole thing. Yeah. South Africa needs a balanced conversation that distinguishes between local migration and criminality, policy debates and xenophobia, border management and collective blame. Second, governments across Africa must improve migration governance, efficient documentation systems, legal migration pathways, labor coordination, and stronger regional cooperation can reduce tensions in uncertainty. Thirdly, political leaders must avoid inflammatory rhetoric. Words matter. Leaders should not exploit migration anxieties for short-term political gain, because such language can have real-world consequences. Fourth, there needs to be stronger community-level integration. South Africans and migrants often live side by side without meaningful engagement. You see, cultural dialogue local medium forums, youth programs, business partnerships, and community policing initiatives can reduce mistrust. Fifth, African unity must move beyond slogans. The African Continental Free Trade Area, regional integration, and pan-African cooperation require Africans to see one another not as threats, but as partners in development. The irony is that South Africa itself was supported by the rest of Africa during apartheid. Countries like Nigeria, Zambia, Tanzania, Angola, and others gave political, financial, diplomatic, and military support to the liberation struggle. That history should encourage mutual respect rather than hostility.
All right. Thank you so much, Michael and MBEWE, for your time with us on the program this morning. We do appreciate you. But of course, because of our time right now, we'll have to let you go.
Yeah. And we most likely would maybe have you some other time to discuss the economic implication, because this is another very important, this is another very important angle to the conversation.
Exactly.
We are heavily interconnected economically to disengage. So we'll be looking at other ways that we can, you know, promote this collaboration, economic collaboration, by the way, between Nigerians and South Africa. Thank you so much again for joining us on the conversation.
Thank you.
We're also spiritually connected. We mustn't forget that we are also the African spirit. You see what I'm wearing? I don't know if you can see my t-shirt.
Oh, we can.
We can,
sure.
We can see it.
Yes.
Very clear.
We need that.
Yes.
We need that. That's what we need.
All right.
Definitely.
Thank you so much.
Right,
thank you so much, Michael and Barry.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Thank you.
All right.
Have a lovely day.
Have a lovely day ahead.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Well, we've been speaking with Michael MBEWE, an international relations and diplomacy journalist based in South Africa. And of course, we've been talking about the xenophobic situation happening in South Africa. And of course, he has given us answers to some of the questions that we're asking. And we do hope that all of these issues are going to be resolved and we don't have to have the xenophobic tensions reoccurring in South Africa anymore. And that is our hopes, as well as the hope of Michael MBEWE.
Yes, and just like I was trying to point out, because of time, we were not able to explore that part. According to Tech Business Economy, the trade, or Nigeria-South Africa trade, has exceeded about $2.16 billion in 2025. They depend on us to some extent, energy-wise. We also do some export and import duties between both countries. But if there's a breach of trust between these countries, what is the fate of our economic connections with South Africa? And like our guest has said, Pan-Africanism is the gospel that we should preach, where the rights of each African nation is upheld. I go to another African country, I feel at home because we are